is really bright and awesome. So I can see some of you. Perfect. So first of all, thanks to the ViewSource staff for having me. It's wonderful. Great folks here. And the transcription, amazing. It's really great being here. And this venue is been really inspiring, actually. So I got here yesterday, and one thing I'm noticing is that we're having a lot of overlapping themes in our talks. I also will reference The Simpsons in a little bit. I have an anecdote about Mike Taylor. I know, just one. I could add another one, really, right? Like all of the other presenters, I love the web. So you mentioned I've been working in the open web since 1995. I saw my first web page in 1994, and for the life of me, I've never been able to find this page again, but it was some mixed media artist. It was really wild art. I was going to college, and it totally blew my mind and kind of set in my head that the web is just this wild and creative place. It's wonderful. And it's also this place for business, which is interesting and a source of some of the issues that we have today. But it's also a place where people from all over the world connect. It's just really an incredible political and social experiment. And the web enabled me to see this story. I don't know if you all saw this. It has everything, though. There's a crime, there's a jailed bird, and there's a stale piece of bread. And let me just zoom in a little bit for a moment. So in case you missed the story, the bird is in jail because its owner was caught in a robbery, and the police didn't have a bird cage. So they were like, okay, we'll just stick it in the cell and give it some water and some bread because they didn't know where to put it or whatever. And then I just want to bless the GDPR or the e-privacy directive or whatever that produced this image, because this is just amazing. So Diane Hofstad is going to give she's doing a conversation corner a little bit later about VR and some of the privacy issues. But I just want to let you all know that putting a bar across the eyes of a bird does not protect its privacy. You need to disguise the feather patterns, the perching style, the length of the tail, the size and shape of the beak. Anyway, it's just not going to protect it. So if you want to protect a bird's privacy, we can talk later. In the words of Bruce Schneier, I am a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. I feel incredibly lucky that I get to work on Firefox, and the threats and problems that I'm going to talk about today, they're really faced by everyone, and many of the solutions that I'll talk about are things that every browser does or could do. And some of the work that Mozilla does is uniquely us. And it springs from our mission. So the backdrop here is a web that is increasingly influenced by big data and what some people call psychographic driven marketing. There's some fundamental questions that we need to kind of debate about this. And I'm just going to really scratch the surface here. It's a really huge topic. But what I'm hoping here is to convince you that browsers are uniquely situated to have a very significant technical and policy impact on massive data collection, and we all have a stake in what happens next. So before I can talk about the web and privacy, though, I feel like I should explain how I think about privacy. To me, privacy is how we form our sense of self. It's how we become individuals and form relationships. It's how we form critical thoughts and then decide whether or not we're going to share them. Sometimes, we invent technology that helps with this. As a manager, I spend a lot of time in meetings with people who are all over the world, and we do that over video. And I've had a lifelong problem controlling my facial expressions and reactions. So face mute, it's an amazing invention, right? We have technology that assists us in every aspect of our interaction on the web. So Mozilla's founders believed that privacy was such an important concept that they enshrined it in our manifesto, and this is it. Individual security and privacy on the internet are fundamental and must not be considered optional. So this is the principle that guides much of the privacy work that I do. It is balanced against the social and political realities that we face. And we're working on developing products that demonstrate our worldview, but also make effective global policy change that puts people's rights at the center. But privacy is, excuse me, more than a personal right to choose. In order to exercise privacy, we really need to be free from surveillance. There's this great paper called "What is Privacy For?" by Julie E. Cohen, and it's freely available online. You can just search for it. And this is published in, I think, 2012. And she makes the argument that privacy is not just an individual right or simply the right to choose to be private, but that it's a collective right, and it requires nuanced and sometimes unprincipled thinking in order to defend it. So she also describes the purpose of privacy in a way that I fundamentally agree with, which is that privacy ensures that the development of subjectivity and the development of communal values don't proceed in lockstep. This is the source of creative tension behind changing culture and really making a better world. And it's like, get very personal here, like it's quite personal to me as the child of a Chinese man and a white American woman. To me, like without freedom of expression, freedom, like privacy, freedom of thought, like I literally would not exist. And it's that privacy and freedom also that enables Mozilla to exist in the world. And one of the critical definitions that Julie Cohen shares is that surveillance is attention that is purposeful, routine, systemic, and focused. And the purpose of modern surveillance, and the purpose that I feel like I am fighting the most today, is to reduce volatility and ensure sustainable profits. Government overreach is definitely a problem, but I believe that the existential threat that we have today are these systems that nudge, that try to smooth out profits and make people's behavior more predictable. She calls this process modulation, which is an extremely powerful tool to shape people's behavior. And I watched this video of Alexander Nix from Cambridge Analytica. I don't know if you all know who he is, but yeah. This German marketing conference invited him to speak, and it was just an amazing thing, because then there was this panel that asked him if he was proud of himself at the end. It was great. So yeah, he had an amazing answer. You should watch it. So anyway, he repeated this claim that people are willingly, as individuals, choosing to share their personal information as inputs into the system that he runs. And I think he's right to a point, but where he's not right is that most people really do not understand the conclusions that are being drawn or the feedback loops that are being created based on their personal information. Anyway, so let's have a look. What kind of things are pervasive surveillance used for? So I'm an Instagram user. And I have a few friends, kids who swap who have kids and we swap photos or whatever. And the system has decided that I really need a new pair of shoes. And so I've seen the exact same pair of shoes like 100 times. Just keeps showing me this, like hoping that I'll buy. And guess what? One day, I found myself on their website, typing in my credit card. And I have like a personal rule, like I'm not gonna buy shoes on the internet. I'm going to try them on my feet before you buy them or whatever. But the repeated presentation of this to me got me to move, got me to do that. I didn't end up buying them, but I was very close. It's a close call. So here's another example of how the ad surveillance network is functioning. This is my Mike Taylor story. So we've all heard about creepy ads where people swear their device must have been listening to them. I was sitting hanging out with Mike and his wife who were here, and he was telling me about this time where he was driving somewhere, and they were talking about a place to eat, and they were just chatting, and he was like, oh, I better get that the address on my phone and map it. Pulls up his map, and what he found when he opened the map was that the address was already there, this place was already there, and a little bubble had been dropped on the place, and he was like, oh, that was weird. But this one is kind of similar. So this image was sent to me by my friend's husband, Luke Welling, And he had recently suffered like a pretty serious injury to his hand. The next day, he opens up Facebook, and it shows this ad, which I don't know if you can tell, it's Homer with a hand injury. And it's like a poster that's like telling you to be more safe. And it's for sale. So like, I think what happened here, because we don't really know, right? Clearly some system in Facebook had determined that he had hurt his hand. And you know, then somebody at Granger had bought some sort of an ad maybe for people who have recently had hand injuries. Like, I don't know, it's so weird. But you know, yeah, so anyway, so he ended up having this. But you know, now that I've seen that, I had this thought, and I asked some of my coworkers, I was like, do you think we could get even more specific? Have any of you seen this, the spinner? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, there's a few of you. So you should totally check out this site. It's pretty absurd, and we're pretty sure it's a parody, because the guy that runs the site, he's given some pretty outrageous interviews to a bunch of mainstream news outlets. So the idea is you can spend $49, and you can buy some ad time that targets someone very specifically. Like one of the ideas on there is like, oh, you want your family to be okay with you getting a puppy. So you show them lots of like, you know, stories about great puppy stories. There's another one that's like you want to influence your, you know, your spouse to be to propose to you. And so there's that. So there's all sorts of things, and they start out like pretty like, you know, bad, but mostly innocent, and quickly kind of get dark. So you'll see from some of the profiles that we know are generated that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, it's just really not out of the question that we could figure out how to buy an ad and which parameters that we could use in order to ensure that we show them to a specific person. And you know, as you get overlapping categories, you're going to get more and more specific about a person. And you could probably make sure that you show them an ad that you wanted them to see. So, you know, all those are kind of goofy examples, and the spinner one, you know, is probably not real world at this point, but really those particular things don't really do harm to people, and I'm sure some of you may have a little more even extreme views on ad targeting than I do, but I wanted to take a moment to get out there a couple issues with this system that give me pause and are not so amusing really, and kind of motivate my work. So looking back at those shoes, so I'm a woman, and those shoes that I was seeing ads for were for women, and it kind of makes sense that they would want to target women for women's shoes. It's harmless enough, but you know, it turns out that this kind of audience segmentation can be used in ways that are actually quite harmful. So this is a pretty obvious case of abuse of profiling. Facebook letting job advertisers only show advertisements to men, and they were calling out Uber in particular here. There's this great organization called ProPublica that researches data abuse, and they put this out last year, and they just had an update actually in the last like couple weeks, maybe the last week. They learned that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a regulatory agency in the US, had investigated the claims that were in there made by ProPublica, and was now forcing Facebook to restrict the use of job, housing, and a few other kinds of ad buyers so that they couldn't use this audience segmentation in the future. It's actually kind of a positive ending to that story. Another reason why I really care about targeting is it has to do with this thing called profiles of reference. And here's a list of just the few possible profile categories that advertisers can use. And there's a link down there at the bottom to the full list, which is kind of disturbing if you look at all of it. Some of these are problematic alone, but in combination they can be particularly concerning. And these are conclusions that are drawn by algorithms about people, and they're turned into a very terse label for advertising. They can be eerily accurate and about extremely personal things. You know, and some of these profiles are being generated and used for real-time advertising, of course. And we could assume that all the advertisers, you know, have our best interests in mind, and that they're only showing us ads for things that are going to help us with these problems. But we know that we are in an adversarial situation right now for people who are buying ads, as well as like their use of social media. And these systems that people are buying ads, they don't really try to get you to buy shoes anymore. They're lying about who they are, they're faking information. They're trying to influence political views, and they're influencing elections. So stopping the data collection that leads to the generation of these profiles being useful is definitely part of the work of my team. So given all that, how is it that Firefox helps any of this? So I want to say some of the things I'm going to talk about, like I said earlier, they're really things that are part of every browser or could be. And I think about this in the combination of ensuring like basic security, preventing surveillance, fighting surveillance, and finally establishing better defaults and educating people about what they are. So the first thing that we have to ensure is that we maintain security for users, despite the fact that, the browser is this place where we run untrusted code from people that we don't know, and we just kind of like hope for the best. Hope may be underselling it a little bit, but there's like a ton of really great work that goes into this. And here's some just big areas. This is just like kind of like a high-level selection of topics. There's a lot more that goes into this, but thinking through like the basic security things that need to happen in a browser, we have to have OS-level sandboxing, and this is to restrict access to APIs that could be used and abused. We need process-level isolation of sites. This is Spectre and Meltdown. It's called site isolation in Chrome, and our project to do this in Firefox is called Fission. We fix a ton of security bugs and just bugs in general. And we use the Safe Browsing API, which is something that Google maintains to prevent users from accidentally visiting malware and phishing sites. Phishing is one of the bigger problems that faces like regular users today. We also write things in Rust, which is awesome. Or sometimes we rewrite things in Rust. One thing that we're implementing from scratch today is HTTP3, or it's called Quick, and it's just starting to be integrated now. And we're really thinking about, like another thing, I didn't put it in the slides, but we're thinking about WebAssembly as well as something that we can use, like not just like to deliver applications, but actually in the browser, maybe to sandbox third-party applications. And honestly, like I said, there's a lot more here, both in terms of like standards development, implementation, our build process, and things like our collaboration with Tor. But most of the other browsers do many of these things, or most of them. And at this point, we all do that because we all take security quite seriously. So once we secure the browser, we have these privacy features that we implement. And those features don't exist in a vacuum. They're often accompanied by policies, open processes, and maybe even a community to support them. So tracking protection, the original version of tracking protection has been in the browser for quite a long time. This is one of the ways that we fight surveillance in the browser. Safari has ITP, and I think Edge was talking about ITP as well, which is like a local machine learning approach that we think is really cool. Our approach is list-based, and doesn't involve machine learning, but so what tracking protection does is, in its most strict form, is it actually just doesn't load the trackers. It blocks them at the network level. It's in this component called Neko that it blocks them. And in its least strict form, it simply blocks the trackers from having read access to data about a website. We may also strip cookies for trackers that we find are evading our policies, which has happened. And we operate this system, by working with a third party, Disconnect, and they create and maintain these lists. And they've established a criteria that you can see and read on their website, and an accountability framework for dealing with, incorrectly added sites and things like that. So this is one of those examples of us combining a technology with a transparent and accountable policy approach, that underpins just about everything we do. So another thing that my team works on is this thing called the Certification Authority Root Program and the Common CA database. This project is run as like a radically open forum that manages which organizations are trusted by Firefox to serve SSL and TLS certificates, grant them. So our program is considered, the gold standard, honestly, for deliberative and open processes in this industry. And there are many organizations that just simply follow our lead or wholesale use our root list in order to secure HTTPS in their, whatever it is, open source project, product, whatever. And no other trust program is open like ours. It's kind of amazing. Actually, you get to see the people who administrate this program calling out CAs and telling them they screwed something up, and then a bunch of people on the internet piling on. And anyway, on a mailing list, it's great. It's like very cordial. But anyway, our policies about trust and accountability and transparency, they really, like I said, they underpin the security of HTTPS through this program. Another area of work that we do that I don't know is as obvious is internet protocol work. We have several people who are highly engaged with the IETF. And TLS 1.3 and DNS over HTTPS, or DOE, are both network-level protocol changes to the internet that improve security. TLS 1.3 is also like a really improved performance. And the changes from 1.2 to 1.3 made it significantly harder to intercept and control web traffic. So there was actually a lot of pushback when it was being created. DNS over HTTPS, or DOE, like I said, is another internet protocol. This one's a little more controversial right now. What it basically is it takes DNS requests and tunnels them through HTTPS. And what's interesting about this is it takes DNS, which has traditionally been a text-based protocol, a plain text protocol, and encrypts it. And it makes it, by tunneling it through HTTPS, it makes it much more difficult to filter or eavesdrop on. So Firefox approach to this rollout is different than Chrome's, and what we've decided to do is combine a very strong policy approach which limits the storage of DNS data to 24 hours and ensures transparency and accountability for any blocking, like either censorship or it could be some other kind of blocking, but ensuring that there's transparency to that so that people actually know that things are being blocked, because that's not the case in a lot of places today. Anyway, we're taking this rollout quite slow, and initially it's only going to go to the US, but we're working to find good trusted recursive resolver partners throughout the world right now, and our hope is, honestly, that this protocol gets deployed everywhere because it's going to significantly reduce surveillance throughout the world. So we're also working on this thing called Firefox Private Network, which is supposed to be like a beta name, but we'll see. It'll probably have a name when it is actually fully released. Right now, it's in just testing phase, and it's free right now, but we probably are going to charge some nominal fee for it later for the operating costs of it. It's currently structured as a secure proxy that just proxies everything in your browser to a third party. And our goal here is to provide protection to users by hiding their IP address from trackers. Providing this is part of a layered approach to security, where we're enabling tracking protection by default, continuing to implement other privacy-enhancing features that reduce surveillance, and helping people hide their IP address while they browse, which, the IP addresses are a significant source of unique identification for users, because honestly, most people's IP address, particularly in their homes, they don't change over time. So the last bit of anti-surveillance work that we do is to educate people about it in the product, as well as with publications and papers and things like that. But I'm just going to show 3 things. I already kind of did this massive laundry list of tech. But I realized when we do this, when I was preparing for this talk, we probably need a central place where we would list these things. So I'm going to take that upon myself to do that when I get back home, after the conference, though. So here's just three things that came to mind. One new thing that you'll see in Nightly and Beta today is our enhanced tracking protection, protection report. This shows you how many trackers have been blocked by your system, and it provides some links to additional information. This is more for just regular people that are using the browser and they're curious about what is happening with tracking protection. Anyway, we're adding more support to this tool over time, and it'll include support for services that we operate. Something that the Mozilla Foundation works on is called the Internet Health Report. They pick different topics each year, but surveillance was a big part of the 2019 report. And these are just these short pieces that are collections of primary sources to give people a fast way, and a summary, give people a fast way to get an understanding of a topic. I think it's actually pretty valuable, to just get people to understand these big complex things that take a lot of time to research if you don't really have a guide into it. I also wanted to share Firefox Monitor. This is a service based on Have I Been Pwned Yet's database, which is the greatest name for business ever. And what it does is it just alerts you if your email address has been hacked, and compromised through a website breach. So when websites get breached, often the breach data gets posted somewhere. And so, this particular service goes around looking for that, and then if they find it, they let you know. So, the purpose is just to really help people with a very common problem, which is like, okay, I've been breached, like, what do I do? And also, sometimes you don't get informed in a timely manner on these breaches. We've occasionally, gotten information before, people were informed by the company. So anyway, we support multiple email accounts to be monitored in a single Firefox account, and we send out those alerts when new breaches happen. So we've hit about 4 million subscribers in the service, and it's one of our more popular things that we've been working on lately. So I put a note in here to note that we're close to the end. Whew. Okay, so just a few more slides. I just wanted to say, privacy is really essential to being human. It's how we grow and change and make the world a better place. And the web is part of our world, So I really believe that privacy is essential for being a human on the web. But what we know is that the web really wasn't designed with privacy in mind. It really wasn't designed with surveillance in mind. It really wasn't designed thinking about the threat model at all, really. And those threat models have evolved, and we're still trying to catch up. And I really think that we now need to disrupt this system that's emerged, and we need to protect everyone, not just ourselves, well, we do need to protect ourselves, protect myself from buying extra pairs of shoes that we don't need. We need to protect people from being discriminated against for jobs or housing. And, I also think we need to protect people from having our essential selves being labeled and nudged, in these scary and even dangerous ways with these feedback loops in advertising systems. So, what can we do? What can we do to help preserve privacy? Well, I really believe that browsers provide this very understandable way very understandable privacy properties to people. And we can fight surveillance right in the browser and have a sustainable future for the web. That's what I believe, anyway. Firefox does a lot here on a tech and policy basis, and other browsers do a lot too, but I really think we could all do more. And we can do more through encryption, like in the protocol level. There's lots more to do there. There's a standard called ESNI that I hope that we get through as well that would encrypt the last kind of bit of unencrypted DNS information. We can all do this through policies in the browser, standards, and also by blocking harmful tracking and enabling user choice. So I believe that every person or company also can take action to reduce the amount of data that we collect. So Mozilla has a site that describes our lean data practices, our data stewardship programs, and we welcome anyone. Like if you scroll down to the bottom, there's like this link that's like, click to contact us. Talk to us about lean data. Like we love to have those conversations. And we have people that go out and give talks and things like that to organizations about this. And what about our future, right? The one that Henri shared yesterday, of this ever-expanding world and phones everywhere. Some of them feature phones, but some of them phones with apps. We're going to have these phones with apps, so what are we going to do about those? Well, we know that apps are invading people's privacy basically without restraint at this point. And unlike the browser, there's only these monopoly-like app stores that are controlling the policies and the gatekeepers for this. They're the ones that are reviewing these apps and checking for violations. And we don't really have a set of policies that make sense right now, I think. We're really in this Wild West stage, and I honestly think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I want to close with this. Uninstall your apps. Yeah. You're probably not going to uninstall all of them, but if you just uninstall one. Oh, this is my second Mike Taylor. I was talking to him about this, and he was like, oh man, after you talked to me, I uninstalled a couple apps. So, yeah. All right. Yes, Mike has my back. So, we don't have to accept ubiquitous surveillance and mass data collection as inevitable. We can stop it, and even the little bits that we do to stop it do help. It disrupts it. And I think the way you got to think about this is what kind of a future do you want? We are right now on a path to a modulated one. You know, it's going to be modulated by ad tech and profiling. It's already happening. It's happening today. And so I'm asking you, uninstall those apps. Use the browser, especially in the mobile web. Support PWAs and alternatives. I know I'm preaching to the choir here on that, but I still think it's important to say. I think it's important to say to a lot of different audiences. Of course, I'd love for you to pick Firefox, but really, I know, just choose the web. It's really worth your time to think about what happens in this ecosystem. And I'll just say, we're hiring. You can join us in this fight. So, yeah, thank you very much.